live. Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
But I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? You know, pistols and fondle slap of choice, I don't know what that was, internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information, because seriously, they don't want you to have just read these two sources whenever I try to prove out. You know, it's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to be sadly disappointed. Another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
Because I damn sure know I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And that is certainly that. We are live tonight. It is the Ochelli Effect, and as the obnoxious bumper states, I am Chuck Ochelli. So, what are we doing tonight? Big surprise for the people that listen to me normally. I'm going to talk about the JFK assassination. Yeah. Well, of course, it was 51 years ago today that our 35th president was publicly executed, in my opinion, and of course there's not much to that opinion because it's an absolute fact. Now, of course, there are many different theories out there. There are many different explanations for what actually occurred. Of course, you have your official explanation, or pardon me, explanations, because after all, the Warren Commission in 1964 determined that it was Lee Harvey Oswald and Lee Harvey Oswald alone who had fallen the president there in Dealey Plaza with a Mannlicher Carcano bolt-action rifle, which couldn't even shoot straight when it shot straight, and happened to be the humanitarian weapon, according to the Italians who, exported it as surplus. But anyhow, there is also the other explanation presented to you in the 1970s by the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which was that, of course, Oswald is still involved, but to a 93% certainty, we have a conspiracy. Thusly, for the first time in American history, there was two official conclusions to investigations done by the federal government regarding a particular situation, a historical event, a criminal event, in fact. So, of course, this is what I'm going to spend my time on tonight, and anybody who listens to me normally is well aware of that I do spend a great deal of time on it, have spent a lot of time on it, and have torn my hair out a lot over the minutia in this case for more than 2 decades, and try to vet the information as best I can, try to present the information as best I can to you regarding the actual historical reality. But I digress, don't I? So before I go any further, I'm going to let you guys know that this is actually being simulcast on 2 different networks tonight. One of them has not been advertised or pushed, but it is also being sent over the stream at the TLB network as well as my home base here at ucy.tv. So we are across a couple of different networks. They both use Chatango if you want to join in. And in the second hour, by the way, and I'll give the phone number again later, you'll be able to join in the conversation, ask anything, comment. Of course, attacking the host of this show is perfectly acceptable, but you are not permitted to attack the guest. So, by all all means call in at 718-717-8296 in the second hour, and I will definitely field whatever it is you have to say. Also, if you have me on your Skype list, that's fully acceptable as well. If you don't and you want to join in that way, I will drop you straight into the call. If you add the contact Charles we know how to spell generally, and the last name Ochelli with a dot in between the two names. The last name is spelled Ochelli, just in case you didn't know. And I'll gladly accept your contact and drop you into the conversation also in the second hour. But for the first hour, and if I don't run my mouth too much longer, I have a really great guy that I have enjoyed listening to, that I've enjoyed talking to, and I've enjoyed getting to know lately. His name is Stephen Roberts, and he generally hosts a show called Cancel the Cabal across a couple of other networks, and is also somebody who crosses my path at the Liberty Beacon Radio Network as well. But hell of a guy, and the first guy that I could think of that would actually be able to take me through this without letting me ramble on obsessively about too many things, and maybe give you somewhat of a coherent presentation tonight. Steve Roberts, how you doing, sir?
Oh, thanks, Charles. I'll try to give a good show. I always do.
Well, right off the bat, people can tell that you're less high-strung than myself. So, at least you'll be able to slow my roll a little bit, sir. That's what I need here tonight. And Cancel the Cabal, I did say that correctly, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. My first radio network is over there in Ireland, and they used to tease me, and they would say, "Cancel the cable is coming on." But,
nice.
Yes. But I jokingly went with it. That's the name of my show on 3 of the 4 networks I'm on, and the other network I have a co-host on PSN Radio, and that show is called Unraveling the Secrets.
Now that show I wasn't even aware of. Is there a big difference between that one and what you do besides the co-host, or?
Well, we cover a lot of news, mainly. We cover a lot of stuff that a lot of others don't cover. She's a journalist, Suzanne Pozell is, and she has OccupyCorporatism.com, and she also has the USIndependent.com, which I'm a contributor to.
Frequent guest on my show, actually, Suzanne, and one of the administrators on the Ochelli Effect Facebook page as well. So, coincidence, and we never even discussed Suzanne before, but didn't even know we had her in common as well.
No, I sure didn't. But that's sweet, though. She's a great woman, and I love her to death.
No, absolutely, and I always enjoy having her on. I always confess, though, that I got to give her 2 hours when she comes on. Anyway, plenty of time for me to run my mouth about anything in the world. Here's the thing. There are plenty of different people you can turn to regarding the assassination, and I certainly have tried to do presentations with various authors and witnesses, in my short time as a radio host. Trying to give people, the best information I could, and trying to avoid a lot of what I consider to be spurious and sort of non-evidence-based narratives out there. I try and stay away from that kind of stuff as much as I can. But I thought it would be more interesting tonight to kind of really start to expound upon the stuff that I've discovered over the years. And hey, it's a whole lot easier than trying to track down a bigger name or an author or somebody else who isn't busy today because of the conferences and their other radio appearances and everything else. So really appreciate you joining me tonight, and I'm ready whenever you are. If you've got questions, or if you got a place that you want to begin regarding any of the research that I've done over the years, which you're not entirely familiar with, but you'll learn real quick where it is I've concentrated and what it is I've done if you just ask a few questions. So you all set to go?
Yeah, certainly. Okay. Well, I like a lot of Americans. I drank the Kool-Aid back until I think the movie JFK come out. I had heard of all of the conspiracies since I was a little boy, that there were more than one shooter, and there were more than just Oswald involved in the killing. But like I mentioned, I wasn't much of a reader. I mean, I could have gotten all the books out there. I knew that they existed. But until JFK came out, it really made me question what the official story was. And I think it really made a lot of Americans question what the official story was. And I'm not sure, but I think until that time, it was like 60% of Americans didn't believe that Oswald was a shooter. And now, I think I've heard recently, it's upwards of 90% of Americans don't believe that the fairy tale.
Right, depending on the poll numbers you read, you can find anywhere from the very low estimate of 70% and the very high estimate of 90%, and probably it's like most things, it's really truly in between somewhere there, and some of those numbers include people that believe Oswald was involved, obviously, but don't believe that he was the lone gunman because the story doesn't make sense. Now, JFK was definitely a marked place, a sort of watershed event regarding the consciousness of the public about the inconsistencies in the official story. That was in the early 90s. But there have been various events, in the public's sphere of awareness that have caused sort of a resonance of awakening regarding this subject. Previous to that, there was, the Warren Commission came out, and a lot of people believed it. I mean, as the Warren Commission report was being released, in fact, CBS television was running a 2-hour special, which they were halfway through with when the official public release of the original 888-page Warren Commission single volume hit the streets, so to speak, from the government printing office. And in their first hour, they were pretty much explaining how the Warren Commission's conclusions were probably correct. And in the second hour, because they had advanced copies, obviously, they were telling us exactly how correct they were. And good old Walter Cronkite backed it. Now, after that, you have Mark Lane coming onto the scene, putting out a book called Rush to Judgment, which marks a very serious event regarding the public consciousness, because up till that time, a great deal of the public sort of accepted the Oswald narrative, and Mark Lane shook their foundations regarding this. Now, why this is of great significance in the overall scheme of things is that it sort of changed literature in a way, because what was born that day was the greater part of what we would now call modern American history and literature. Generally speaking, the idea was that there was a French concept which was called perspective, and this meant that, and it sounds very simplified, but it really meant that 75 years was the amount of time that needed to elapse between an event of significance and the time that historians could accurately relate it to the public. The trend of that was officially broken by the book "The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich," where a journalist earlier than the JFK assassination had gotten access to a great many captured archives from Nazi Germany, and had told the story of the World War II German war machine from a very unique angle and from way less than 75 years distance. But the JFK assassination gave birth to the real sort of renaissance regarding modern American history and modern history in general, in a literal sense, because a slew of books, and I mean a serious avalanche of well over 1,000 legitimately published books, in less than a decade and a half, hit the streets. And since then, I mean, it's hard to count nowadays with your Kindles and your various other modes by which books can be published, but it has continued to this day to be one of the most analyzed and written about events in history, and certainly the most analyzed, investigated, studied, and relatable events regarding literature in American history, bar none. And pretty impressive for what took, between 6 and 8.5 seconds in Dallas to occur to spawn this. But the evolution of this also continues later on in the 70s, when the Zapruder film is first shown to the American public, via television on Geraldo Rivera's show. And this caused a great deal of upset in the American public and was one of the main catalysts for forming the House Select Committee on Assassinations. So the history of the coverage and the literature of the event are also remarkable, even outside of the event itself.
Yes, they are, absolutely. Well,
have I put you to sleep yet, Stephen?
No, I'm not sure if we were actually going to get into or not, but I spent 2 days with Judith Baker last week. She was in my hometown, and she is actually from my hometown, or just a neighboring hometown, both my hometown and this neighboring hometown. And she come back in for 3 presentations and a book signing. And she happened to mention some things to me that I hadn't heard before. Not that I'm the great researcher like you and others are, but I've followed the conspiracy, well, the so-called conspiracy, and I guess maybe if you want to look at the explanation of a conspiracy, if you have one or more people, that is a conspiracy, and evidence shows that there are more than 2 people that are involved in the murder of Kennedy. But I guess I should have asked before the show. Are we actually going to get into that?
I have no problem covering any area that I know a little something about, and if I don't know about it, I'll be more than happy to say I don't. It's a complicated issue. Judith, for the record, is somebody that I don't find plausible, and have been witness to her story evolving over the years. She does say a great many fascinating things. She has integrated a lot of what has emerged from the research community, in my opinion, over the years into her story, which has changed and is beyond reason, in my opinion. And I can give you a brief synopsis of it, and no offense to you, but I really have a hard time understanding why it is that people accept her narrative. And that being said, I will say on the positive note that I do find her to be a rather talented writer of fiction, and a fairly talented artist, and a seemingly intelligent person.
And she's a decent speaker too. Yes.
And yeah, she's well spoken, sure. I can't take away from her what is, but I don't believe her story. And I can get into that if you want. It'll take me a few minutes to sort of give you a synopsis of why.
Well, I can just tell you my thoughts on her.
Sure, go ahead.
I got her first book, and she gave me a copy of her second book at one of the presentations, and signed it. But I haven't even hardly gotten through the first book, because I've got literally 30 books here that authors and people that have given to me, and I do 4 shows a week, and I try to get a social life in there, and I haven't gotten through one of these 30 plus books that I have, so I can't really tell what to say on her information or her evidence, but I have seen YouTube videos, and I've interviewed her twice, and I still want to say that I'm on the fence on whether I'm going to believe her or not, because for one thing, I think there seem to be a lot of strong women out there in the world. A lot of them are authors. A lot of them are outspoken. And she, I'm sorry, she came out in 1999, she said, in her presentation that I happened to tape. 1999, that was, that was 15 years ago. That was 35 years after the assassination.
Right.
One thing that might lead me to be a little bit more critical of her is, why didn't she come out immediately?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
if in fact she was so in love with him and did just, was really crushed about it. I mean, I don't know. She was 19 at the time, in 1963, and he was 24.
Mm-hmm.
They were both married to different people, and somebody can go from there. But that makes me question why she waited 35 years.
Well, if you don't mind me providing you with a few spoilers about what's in Me and Lee, I'll do that.
Okay.
And tell you why I find it incongruous with reality and logic itself. Let's start with the relationship that you mentioned. Okay. Her story is that she was basically recruited because she was such a brilliant chemist, essentially, in high school. That she was recruited by Alton Ochsner, who's an interesting character in and of himself. I don't know if you've looked into him any.
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, he was the head of the United States Cancer Institute, prominent doctor, was involved politically with some fairly right-wing causes. Was very much about the Get Castro crew, of the American sort of anti-communist patriot movement at the time, and was definitely one of these guys. Who was involved with funding and things like that, and she claims that she was recruited by him to go to New Orleans to be involved in a secret project which would involve trying to give cancer to Fidel Castro. In the course of doing that, she claims that she met Oswald at a post office. There's a whole weird story behind that, and I urge you to just look at that at face value and see how much sense it makes to you. They at some point spontaneously bust out into discussing with each other, introducing to each other, I should say, one another in Russian, because she, although she seems to have lost her ability to speak Russian at this time, claims to have known how to speak Russian at that time, and that was one of the things that she amused herself with, was learning languages. And the two of them just spontaneously seemed to understand that they could speak to one another in Russian. So there is that. There is a whole story about her adventures in New Orleans and Oswald being like her protector, and having spent a great deal of time with her, and despite being married to Marina and having a child and being involved in the great many things that we do know for sure he was involved with, making time to not only be her protector, her lover, but also to be integrated into this what she claims to be a CIA-run operation, to get a Castro assassination plot that would involve these lab rats. And all this kind of thing. And that also brings in David Ferrie. She claims to have, at some point or another run into mafia figures, David Ferrie, Guy Bannister, every figure you could imagine. And, of course, being hidden because she was, the mistress of this man. At the same time, her husband, whose name was Robert Baker, returns to New Orleans where they were supposed to meet up. They get married in a quickie marriage. In her words, they had a quick roll in the hay, and a couple days later he was gone to go establish himself in another city in Florida, I believe. And they continued on, her and Oswald, having this affair until she became revolted with the fact that they were using human test subjects, and had actually killed one of them, by injecting them with this cancer cocktail that they made by sort of crudely and not too intricately explained, by putting like tumors from rats into a blender and creating like a cancer injection cocktail, that could be introduced into Castro and would be snuck into Cuba to be given to him. So Oswald is deeply involved with this, has to learn how to handle lab samples and all these other wonderful things. He's like James Bond and, I don't know, the Duke rolled into one. He's a tough guy. He's a guy who knows how to handle weapons. He's training anti-Castro Cubans. He's involved with all sorts of psyops. and a guy like Clay Shaw, who was a rich businessman, takes pity on them and gives them plenty of room service and free hotel rooms and things so they can have their afternoon delights together during this entire time. Now, if you begin to get to know who Oswald was by talking to some of the people that did, know him for sure, that it's provable that he had run-ins with and everything else, that it's provable that he interacted with at various times in his life, it's very, very hard to imagine that this guy was sophisticated enough to participate in even half of what she's talking about. That's problem number one. Problem number two, there's other pieces of private information that I, under agreements with people, can't divulge. But there are things that make no sense regarding who it is she claims to have had this very long-standing affair with. There is a continuity problem regarding the amount of time. She claims that he did go to Mexico City to try and bring this cancer cocktail, sort of, and I'm being a little bit flippant about it for time concerns here. But if you sort of lay out the story like that, and then they stayed in contact all the way up till, literally within like 36 hours of his death, because they were utilizing a special network of wires which were utilized by organized crime to keep their betting network together regarding horses and other things like that. They were allowed to use that because Oswald is connected to the CIA, the mob, the FBI, everything. According to her, and she was in contact with him right up till everything went bad with the assassination. And the story is all over the map regarding the logic of what went on.
Hey, Charles.
Yeah.
Did you see what Jax Rocks put in the chat there? It says, Chuck, to be a mole or a spy, you need to be inept. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I don't have the chat room up in front of me. But I will get it open because I'm sure these guys have stuff to say about this. And, yeah, I recognize that there is a place for useful idiots, in the spy game, as it were, in the intelligence game, as it were. And my contention from all the available evidence that I could ever put together, from people that had personal dealings. I'm trying to get to this right now. Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. I had to shut off the extra player there because all of a sudden I heard you on delay.
Okay.
Yeah, but of course there is a place for useful idiots. Like I said, there is a place for people that are inept. But would you trust them with a top secret, cancer formula that needs to be handled with particular protocols? Meanwhile, trusting him with gun running. Meanwhile, trusting him with being involved in the assassination. He's suddenly a marksman despite having no skills or time to hone said skills. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and realize this guy was 24 years old, had only spent a very short time in the Marine Corps, and had an honorable discharge, which was later changed from hardship. He had a hardship discharge because supposedly his mother was ill. And immediately after getting his hardship discharge, went to the Soviet Union as a tourist, so to speak, and then tries to defect. And she claims to have intimate knowledge about that stuff as well, because over those few months that she could have even possibly known him, of course, he laid out everything that he was trained as a super special secret agent to keep quiet about, to her, because I guess, I'm going to be real flippant here. I guess she was just that good in bed. I'm sorry, I have a really hard time with it. First of all, to characterize him as somebody who was, this all-around James Bond, way better than a James Bond figure, really. And at the same time, believe that somebody at her age would be entrusted with all this information and be involved in this great nexus of individuals, which met at no other point but with her, is beyond belief to me, In short, there's a whole lot more to it, and you can track down inconsistencies as you go throughout her story. Her description of Oswald's dyslexia, her description of his intellectual prowess. None of the things that it seems to me would have been absolutely necessary for him to be even remotely the figure that people have uncovered over the years are part of her story. It's rather romanticized, and although she says she came out in '99, there was a book that came out that it was a manuscript of her story.
I think that was 97, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was either previous to that or exactly at the right time.
Yeah.
Her whole putting it back to that is interesting to me, because that's about the time that she emerged again with the Nigel Turner series, The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and was the feature of one of those hour-long shows called The Love Affair, which I find almost comical to view now, because at one point she says that one of the very important facts that Oswald was laying on her was to not forget the name Bobby Baker. Now, this is funny for two reasons. Number one, the whole Bobby Baker idea leads...
Wasn't it?
Well, it was, first of all, yeah, her husband's name was Robert Baker.
Yeah.
I dare say that her lover, even if he was the man on the side, would have been well aware of that fact. And maybe it wouldn't have been of great consequence for her to have to remember that. But aside from that, it was public knowledge at the time that Lyndon Johnson, and in 1963, it was public knowledge that Lyndon Johnson had a great deal to fear from his man Bobby Baker being in trouble. So she lends herself immediately at that time to the LBJ masterminded, or the LBJ did it, theorization, because it was being popularized at the time, and was part of another upcoming episode of Nigel Turner's series. But to believe her story and to believe her so-called evidence at this point is to believe that the mafia, Lyndon Johnson, the CIA, parts of the homosexual underground, which, yes, there was a homosexual underground, especially in New Orleans at the time, that all of these individuals kind of came together, but only meeting really at one point, which was with her. It's just I could take entire shows dismantling what it is that she's had to say over the years. But and another weird thing, just really quickly, is that a guy who tries to defect to the Soviet Union at some point or other is afforded the opportunity by the Soviet Union, because he was under their control at the time. The U-2 went down. The famous shooting down of the U-2 with Francis Gary Powers as the pilot. She claims that Oswald literally got to interview Francis Gary Powers. Sorry? I
didn't say nothing.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, but do you not find that a bit, bizarre to believe?
Well, yeah, she did a lot of name dropping during the presentations. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Get to seeing all these people, the ones that have died, by what's the word I'm looking for? Nefarious means.
The convenient death scenario.
Yes.
Yeah, and I understand that some of that has some value, and some of it is reliable, but a lot of it has been sort of pumped up out of proportion. But to just finish on Baker, because I don't want to spend the whole time on her, I just say look at her story all by itself. Look at how it's evolved over the years. I've spent a lot of time watching interviews, listening to interviews with her, to try and find the consistent, coherent story in there, and what we are also greeted with from her constantly are these threats that they want to silence her. She needs to live in exile. She lives in fear. They've done all kinds of great things to her, like run her off the road and put glass in her food, and recently tried to lock her in her hotel room, I think, and destroyed her computer and shut down the electricity in the place she was staying in. The intelligence agencies are this concerned with her Meanwhile, they had her developing a weapon to slip to a world leader, which would have been a whole lot more efficient at silencing her than any of this nonsense. And we all know that there's plenty enough weapons that if she was truly a target, their tactics would be a lot better than something that's only worthy of the plot twists in an HBO episode of Oz, which literally that was one of the plot twists in the series Oz, that they fed ground up glass to somebody they wanted to get rid of. She's too ridiculous to believe, in my opinion, and I'm actually shocked that she has not only printed a book, has followers, but now has released 500 more pages on David Ferrie, who she, by her own account, only knew for, a few months in the summer of 1963. And on her positive side, just last thing, and I hate to do this because it just takes up so much time with her, on the positive side, there is proof that she worked at a particular company at the same time that Oswald did. That was the Riley Coffee Company. They seem to have been there at about the same time. They were both brought in by temp agency, and here their paths could have crossed. But it seems more likely, in my opinion, that she would have turned her nose up at this quirky guy, and probably realized later that she had a brush with history, as many people have in the JFK, genre of writers. They have had a brush with history, and they have absolutely, exacerbated, inflated, and conflagrated their minor brush with history into a huge narrative, which later on is generally deflated and destroyed when people actually begin to check the real evidence regarding it.
And she also said in her presentations that she's interviewed and has people on the record that have that seen her and Oswald together.
Right. One of those two people is David Lewis's wife, and David Lewis is a laughable witness, in my opinion, at best. And if you want to take a look at what kind of presentation he gave, James Earl Jones in the I think it was in the 80s, might have been the early 90s, but it was either late 80s or early 90s, did a JFK special on primetime TV. It was a big deal, the voice of Darth Vader talking about serious conspiracy regarding the JFK assassination.
Right.
If you listen to the way that David Lewis talks on there, and if you examine any of the interviews this man has given over the years, he's dead now, but he was incredible. And even if he was, it doesn't mean his wife is. And I wouldn't speak to her motives at all. But I do note that she never bothered to tell her sister about the cancer weapon or any of this kind of stuff. And there's a whole broken trail to that. But, just because one person is making up a story doesn't mean that you can't find someone else to support it, too. And that's happened over the years. I mean, we witnessed it with the Roscoe White scenario. We witnessed it with the E. Howard Hunt, did it scenario, which I don't buy either. James Files is a guy who is a confessed assassin of the president, claims to be a Grassy Knoll shooter. Too bad it's incongruous with the facts that we have learned post his original confession. And another guy that, if you get him alone for a minute, will tell you that he knew everybody from Fletcher Prouty to David Atlee Phillips, to Lee Harvey Oswald, et cetera, et cetera. He knew everybody.
Do you think Hunt was there that day? Do you think he was the hobo or whatever they called him?
No, absolutely not. And there's been, we now know who that is, and his name escapes me at the moment. It's not Chauncey Holt, who claimed to have been one of these three tramps. It's not E. Howard Hunt, who was, who people have tried to assign to being the shorter one, who did kind of resemble Hunt in a way when he got older. But Hunt at the time of the assassination would not have looked like this guy. Was not quite as weather worn as this guy appeared to be. And there's an arrest record which you can go to the Dallas police archives at this point in time, and now you can know exactly who those people were.
Yeah. One thing that gets me about that story, Charles, is, well, I guess I should ask, do you want to be Charles or Chuck or?
I always say this, my friends call me Chuck, but lately a lot of people are calling me Charles, so I'm starting to think I have less friends than I thought I had.
All right, Chuck, I'll try to say that. What gets me is witnesses that ran up the grassy knoll to, go after the shooter there, the policeman or whatever they called him, the grassy knoll shooter. Many of these witnesses said that both Secret Service and FBI agents told them to get back. There was nothing, they weren't allowed to get over the fence or anything like that. And then allegedly pictures are taken of these hobos, one that kind of resembles Hunt. And it just doesn't make sense if Secret Service and FBI are actually in on this. Why they would let these men be photographed?
Well, there's one problem. The next thing is, don't be offended by this, but you got to get the story a little straighter about that. What happens here is, in the moments immediately following the assassination, people did wind up running up and actually entering into that parking lot area behind the picket fence and everything else. Yeah. If you look hard enough, you can actually see searches of this. You can even spot an interesting guy named Roger Craig, who worked for the sheriff's department, who was actually trying to conduct a search of the parking lot. The tramps are arrested afterwards. People weren't altogether sent away from that area. You can see plenty of people milling around, minutes afterwards in that area. There was a slight delay because the majority of the people were either on the deck or on the other side of the street, to be honest with you, because that was the last part of it right before the motorcade was going to enter the Stemmons Freeway. So there was no reason to be there. That's the point at which the car should have basically accelerated, and you wouldn't have gotten a good long look at Jackie or John. So there's a thinned out crowd there. The crowd did run to the scene afterwards, and you can see that stuff evidenced in the films. But people did get back there. The Secret Service, having been on the ground at that time, is a falsehood. The Secret Service, by the time the entire motorcade left Dealey Plaza, was gone. Go ahead.
The way I understand it, these men claim to be Secret Service and FBI, but that's just the allegation.
Well, right, but part of that is explainable by testimony at the time that people have ignored over the years, and this is why you got to be very, very careful about this stuff. There is a claim that there was, at least one Secret Service agent being spotted at various locations, running around the knoll, the area, flashing his book of credentials. And according to the Secret Service, there was nobody in Dealey Plaza afterwards, so you assume that once the motorcade's gone, all Secret Service agents are gone, and it's a correct assumption. They actually weren't lying regarding that. There was a Secret Service agent who leapt from a car further back in the motorcade than Johnson was, further back than Kennedy was, obviously. A very little filmed area of the motorcade. There were buses in there, all kinds of stuff. He leapt from one of the follow-up cars and ran up on the knoll with his credentials out, ran around the book depository building, and his name was Lem Johns, and he told that story at the time, and even related it to the Warren Commission. And it's right there in black and white. So if you take the account of Lem Johns at face value, you can then place a Secret Service agent running around with an open book of credentials, identifying himself, trying to get a handle on maybe where there was a shooter. Now, his quick run around, he did before the motorcade completed its turn through Dealey Plaza, and he jumped on another car and went to Parkland with everybody else. So that's a fallacy that's been in existence for quite a while because people haven't been careful enough to actually examine the record.
Well, I understand what you're saying. And like I said in the beginning, Chuck, I'm not the researcher that you and others have been. So I've only gotten bits and pieces of parts of the story.
Well, understand, I don't even claim to be like, an authority on it, to the degree that many people are much greater authorities than myself on it,
Sure.
easily. It's just that, and it's a difficult thing to tackle because, with all this examination, with the mistakes that have been made over the years, with the purposeful disinformation, which has been put out there not only by, by people who are attention seekers, like I do absolutely believe that that's what, Baker is, and, just somebody who, requires a greater romantic entry into history because nobody else would pay attention to her otherwise. This is what I think of her. There are many people that are like that. There are others that are simply mistaken. And there is a huge flood of, just good and bad information out there. So for anybody to even begin to sort through what exists regarding, legitimate evidence and what is spurious in one way or another, you have to dedicate yourself to it for quite a while. When I say that there are easily 1,000 solid, legitimate, full-length books that one has to read in order to get a real breadth of what went on up until, the 25th anniversary, imagine where that's all gone since then. Like I told you, one of the most, and I told you this off the air, but I'll say it here. One of the most definitive pieces of work on it is 30,000 pages long, written by Dr. Walt Brown, and it's the Master Chronology to the assassination, which covers a whole lot of ground. And his 30,000 pages, is not even remotely, like it's not as though you're going to have a virtual library of everything. But you will have a synopsis, at least.
How many volumes is that?
Well, it's in electronic form, so the literal printing, I'm not sure. But I do know it's larger than the Warren Commission's pages, which, was 26 volumes plus the single volume report. And, although 30,000 pages may not actually, cook down to what it was in those books, it's still pretty immense. And my own confession here regarding it is that I've only gotten through about 3,000 or 4,000 pages of it myself. But very complete and very honest look at, at the entirety of just about every situation, it seems to me, from start to finish. And that's about the volume you're looking at, regarding sort of collating information as best you can over the years.
Desert Hawk just posed a question there in the chat. I guess it says Chuck has studied the JFK stuff quite a bit, but what to do about it? And that's what I've always, people have asked me too. What to do about all this information, about all these conspiracies that get blown apart?
Well, this is where I start to go out on a limb that a lot of people don't accept, and some people even laugh about. But here's the honest point of view as far as I'm concerned. What needs to happen here is that if we can hold the people accountable that I believe need to be held accountable, it would begin to unravel the stranglehold that the intelligence and the military complexes have over our country, because it would lead to, even greater trails where you would find that a whole lot more crimes were committed, that stem from this. It's sort of like the fruit of the poison tree, in evidence speak in a way. We wouldn't have had the Vietnam War at all. So if you can prosecute the people, if you can hold people accountable, you might be able to actually get, if you can make the entire public understand this, you might be able to get them to understand that we lost control of our country, on that day for certain, as far as I'm concerned. And you have an event that, that really did change the scope of things throughout the planet.
Well,
We might be able to rewind it and take back some of this stuff that they've taken away from us.
I
Yeah.
think I've got a debate for you there, Chuck. I think the American people actually lost control of our government probably at the turn of the 20th century when entertainment system came in. People became so enthralled with Hollywood and the moving pictures, radio, and that they forgot what they were. We used to be farmers, and we used to hold our politicians' feet to the fire. I remember in one of my history classes, it was said back in the middle of the 19th century, just before the Industrial Revolution hit. If the people found out that a politician lied about what they were going to do, they would march down to his office and beat the snot out of him, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gotten away from that. They are our lords and masters now. They're not our servants anymore.
Well, I don't take too much of an issue with what you're saying, except I would track it back to 1907, when a false panic was sort of thrust upon the public via the bankers. The problem, reaction, solution thing comes into play here. We have, the creation of the Federal Reserve, which was meant to protect us from any further panics, and we certainly lost control there. But in my opinion, what happened in the early 60s here was the unleashing of the Kraken, so to speak, regarding the CIA, regarding the intelligence complex that we are contending with now. The seeds for, the NSA being absolutely ubiquitous, regarding our privacies, regarding every one of our movements and everything else, was solidified when Kennedy was moved out of the way. Plus, we have the marked change in warfare. I mean, even though we all know that the wars had been a racket and were all manipulated, like World War II, World War I, there was always the fun both sides of it and play the game aspect to it. But post-Kennedy assassination, being thrust into Vietnam and being thrust into all these other adventures throughout the world that weren't declared, great crusades for the betterment of humanity and so on and so forth. We had brushfire warfare for blatant profit that was no longer being conducted the same way. And once the intelligence agencies were out of the control of even our corrupt officials, and became a corrupt entity unto themselves, we have the birth of the greater drug complex, which has poisoned us from both ends. The pharmaceutical industry, in addition to the illicit drug industry, regarding the proliferation of heroin on the streets in the 70s, conveniently when we have access to the Golden Triangle. Immediately following that, while we are covertly involved in South America, we find that cocaine becomes an accessible drug and becomes the scourge on the streets in our country. And then crack cocaine just to make it a little more efficient, because suddenly people in urban areas became great chemists, and had endless supplies, coincidentally, while we're backing up, death squads and things like that in Central and South America, until a guy named Ollie North winds up in front of Congress and all that, and we have the Iran-Contra scheme, played out in front of the public.
Yeah. And what did he get for it? He got pretty much a Hollywood movie career out of it, or a TV career, TV show career.
Right? Why wouldn't you reward your good soldiers or your good dogs? He did his job. He did exactly what he was supposed to do,
Right,
and
right. He kept the accountability away from the White House.
Well, right, and made sure that a middle manager, but a much higher manager than himself, named George H.W. Bush, could keep conducting his criminal affairs.
Yes.
The difference between a politician and a legitimate organized crime mob, serious mafia guy. The mafia guy usually has a better suit, and and the politician goes to jail a whole lot less.
Well, they do say politics is the Hollywood for ugly people, so take that.
Well, you got it. And, if you count the insides, Hollywood is the Hollywood for ugly people. But, I digress.
Right.
And I know I'm a little long-winded, Steve, and I do apologize. And you know what? Well, since you asked me about the Chuck and Charles thing, should I call you Steve or Steven?
That doesn't matter either.
Okay, cool.
Do you have a break at the hour, or do you just kind of take one wherever you feel like it, or?
No, you know what? On Saturday nights, I always roll straight through, and most other nights, it doesn't matter anyway. I just kind of roll. If you need a break, no problem, though. I'll work it out.
Well, I don't know. I kind of like to get something to drink there, and
well, that's not a problem. Besides that, I gotta kind of let people know again that if they want to call in and all that, they can do that. So go ahead and get your drink, Steve. I'll be fine for a minute.
Okay.
Well, anyway. While Steve's going and getting his drink, I want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight, regardless of how you did it. Hopefully all is going well at the Town Crier, which should be carrying this as well. And, of course, UCY. And I'm sorry, guys, I haven't really caught up to the chat room yet, but, I'm now staring at it, so if you got stuff you want to add in that way, that's fine. If not, if you're listening elsewhere or in the chat room or whatever, and you want to join in on the discussion, yell at me or tell me I'm crazy or whatnot, feel free. Of course, 718-717-8296 is the call-in number. No screening and no holds barred. Again, you got to be kind to the guy who's on the show with me tonight. But you want to attack me, that's fine, I'll deal. Now, also, if you don't want to do it that way and you want to join in via Skype, all you got to do is send a contact request to charles.ochelli. And if you don't know how to spell my name, it's real easy to remember. It's O-C, the word hell, and then I. Ochelli, and I will jump you right in after I accept your Skype request. I won't guarantee that I'll keep you on my list, but I will put you on it to start with, just like what I do on Facebook, right? Anyhow, the JFK assassination is something that, I have spent a lot of time on, and I'm more than happy to discuss it anytime. I am a little hyper, I am a little long-winded, and I do apologize for that. But I also have some pretty serious standards for evidence regarding this stuff, and I keep threatening to do it, but I guarantee you I will do a show one of these days, which I will entitle JFK Myths or JFK Mythology, and I will certainly get to the bottom of most of the crap that is out there. The people that want to give a gun to a Secret Service agent and say that he shot him, whether it's the gentleman sitting in the front seat, or it is the gentleman in the follow-up car who accidentally discharges an M16 or the civilian version thereof, any of this kind of nonsense, the foolishness, in my opinion, that a man fired a poison dart from an umbrella, all of this kind of silliness, the really craziness related to Jackie shot him in the head, all of these wonderful things do need to be tackled, and I'm actually starting to see that in social networking, that there are groups getting together and complaining about what they see regarding the truth, because after all, like I say, if we can get to the bottom of this, we can definitely learn from it. We can see exactly how this game is played, and who knows, maybe be able to hold people accountable if we understand exactly how this happened regarding the malignant growth of the intelligence agencies, and exactly how much they have poisoned everything in our everyday lives. To blatantly execute a man that, regardless of your arguments with the election, was elected and somehow was crazy enough to believe that he was actually in charge, is still of relevance to me, and there is no statute of limitations on murder.
Nope. I'm back now.
Right, and see, I told you I could hold down the fort there.
Yeah, I think it'd be good.
And another thing I want to mention before I forget, we're gonna do something like this again tomorrow on your show, which is Cancel the Cabal, and that'll be on Revolution Radio, right at freedomslips.com, right?
Yep, freedomslips.com. Yes, freedom slips.
Right. I always kind of squish that together, but
Yeah.
it's kind of natural to do so, isn't it?
A little bit there. Yeah, you. If you don't look at it closely, you can make it all one word there. But yes, we'll be there from 3 till 5 tomorrow.
Right, and that'll be Eastern time over there.
So, well, yes.
And so I wanted to make sure I got that in before I forget, because I am the forgetful, sort of legitimately, organically ADD individual. This is what I do.
I was also wondering, I'm not sure if you were kind of explaining why the Kennedy, the why and who of the murder has to be so relevant. I thought that's what you might have been doing while I was gone there, but I think it really boggles my mind. This conspiracy has been around for a long time of the shadow people that run our government. Why they would murder a president right in the middle of thousands and thousands of witnesses. Why they would be so bold and brazen to do that. About the only thing that would come to my mind is they really don't care anymore, and they're going for broke.
Well, it's also terror by example, because the thing that is not quite understood by a lot of people is that Kennedy was challenging directly, let's just say, well, Chuck, shut up about the intelligence agencies. Okay, fine. Well, I'll do that for a moment.
You mean the powers that be? Is it, or that's what they're called anyways, right? The powers that be?
Well,
them.
Well, yeah, but in a very specific way, the military contractors, the war profiteers that continue to flourish even as we speak, definitely got their hooks deeply into the American pocket at that time. And, like Halliburton is not something really new if you trace back the lineage of Kellogg, Brown, and Root, which definitely got their really good money rolling through Vietnam. Kennedy was in the process of extracting the United States from Vietnam. National Security Action Memorandum 263 specifically states that he wanted the first 1,500, and I haven't read it in a long time, but I believe it was the first 1,500 troops out of Vietnam, in 1963, and a complete withdrawal of all U.S. personnel by the end of calendar year 1965. Now, that coupled with the refusal to invade Cuba when two very good opportunities presented themselves, by manipulation once again via the Bay of Pigs, through the personage of Allen Dulles. And then, of course, later on during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there would have been, a great excuse there for American assets to invade and overtake Cuba. He wasn't going to make them a great deal of money. Now, he did give General Dynamics, some money to develop the TFX fighter, which was like an X-Wing looking fighter, awfully interesting contraption for its time. And that story is of interest, and of course that leads through Texas and the very, very crooked Lyndon Johnson and his profiteering as well. But again, he was not giving them the big paydays. He was not willing to turn over control of the CIA to the CIA, essentially. It was still a presidential privilege to have reins over it. He was in the midst of working out a deal with the Defense Intelligence Agency regarding taking over a lot of the things that the CIA was doing. Sorry, I forgot I was going to stay away from intelligence. Let's leave that alone. People are incorrect when discussing the issuance of silver certificates. that this was a unique thing that happened regarding Executive Order number 11110. This isn't a misnomer in that those silver certificates existed for a great many administrations, even previous to Kennedy's, being able to, how can I put this nicely, entering puberty. These silver certificates, these U.S. notes actually existed, not silver certificates, let's be specific. The U.S. notes and the mechanism by which they were printed and the reason for their existence was there long before Kennedy got there and continued on into 1971 when the precious metals scheme of things was changed in the United States, when Richard Nixon took the final steps to remove us completely from the last vestige of the gold standard. So this is when it ended. And Kennedy's executive order, if one bothers to read it, literally turns over the power to issue and control the issuance of the U.S. notes to his Secretary of Treasury, which was C. Douglas Dillon at the time. Definitely an establishment guy who was fully, I don't remember if he was skull and bones, but he was definitely in that neighborhood. In the banker's pockets, so to speak, definitely a Fed cheerleader kind of guy in the administration, and certainly not somebody who was going to do anything revolutionary regarding this. And again, I say this because I like pointing to it. People accept that G. Edward Griffin is an authority on the Federal Reserve. His analysis of this goes in a slightly different direction than mine, but concludes the same way, which is that this is silliness to assume that through that mechanism Kennedy was fighting the Federal Reserve. That being said, he was actually taking steps to change things, was challenging it, and it's very likely, although some of this is still classified, it's very likely that he was actually beginning through Wall Street, which of course his family was very familiar with, to begin to battle the banksters and to begin to battle the Fed, but it really never came to fruition because even the mere whiff of that threat, while the president still held some power to do so, was far too much for them to bear. Now, do I believe that it was a banker that hired a hitman? No, I don't. But if you want to talk motive, the people that were most concerned about making sure the Federal Reserve maintained its stranglehold definitely had a motive to get him out of there one way or another.
Do you think a banker hired a defense contractor to hire a hitman?
Well, see, that's difficult to say without having corroboration, without having some evidence of that. And, is it a fair supposition? Yes. Is it something that we can, prove with anything empirical? No. Does it seem plausible? It seems plausible to me that big money men get together with one another, that big money men discuss power, that people that are powerful do cavort with one another in one way or another. And as you stated so aptly earlier, to conspire, literally coming from the Latin meaning to breathe together, this is precisely what these types of individuals do. Yeah. So higher level money men, higher level bankers, higher level defense contractors, people that were, wielding power via the intelligence agencies.
With the mafias.
Well, see, now here's the problem with that. The mafia thing, I really have a hard time with it, because to literally believe, some people out there actually believe that they masterminded it and had a great motive to remove John F. Kennedy, and also had the power and the mechanism to do so. And I often pose the question, in that case, why wouldn't the official government explanation have thrown those guys under the bus?
Well, because they've actually worked with mafia all along in the past. It's been on record during World War II. Government worked with the Italian mafia, and I believe
absolutely true. I happen to know that for personal reason.
why would they throw one of their best assets under the bus that they've been using for decades and decades and decades?
Because the modus operandi of the people that do this, the people that would hire criminal elements to do so, is not specific to the Italian mafia and doesn't hold any sort of...
it was the Jewish mafia, too. Yeah.
Well, either way, they don't... There is no sort of loyalty among these thieves. The fact is that organized criminals on that level are utilized all the time in every country. They have no problem hiring whoever to do whatever.
Exactly.
But here's your problem.
The intelligence agencies use them too.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm speaking to. I mean, we know about the Castro situation, via the church committee and and the Rockefeller Commission, believe it or not, and a few other investigative bodies that prove that stuff out. That's true, but they had no sort of high level way of really getting involved with this stuff. A lot of accusations have been made, but really it's bravado and misdirection. You can easily place it on them. If you believe a whole lot of things, they would have to have so much intimate knowledge and be so interchangeable with the best of our assets, regarding the intelligence community, that it's almost unbelievable. I mean, like the story about, Jack Ruby having been an intelligence asset. I've seen people try to call Jack Ruby a Mossad agent. Totally insane. The reason is that Ruby himself, again, if you talk to anybody who knew him, if you wind up talking to his family members, his rabbi, anybody who ever really dealt with him legitimately, the guy was not psychologically capable, again, of handling such a thing. He was just a low-level kind of guy who was utilized. This is a good example of a guy that they would utilize because, he would take orders, he would follow them for simple jobs, but you don't get him involved in complex issues. And to be a Mossad agent requires, or at least at that time, required, some sort of discipline. Ruby was not a disciplined man in any way, shape, or form. Couldn't control himself. In fact, according to just about every account that I've ever come across that seems remotely legitimate. And this is the problem, again, with a lot of the Italian mob that people have tried to pin this stuff on. They didn't have the resource to pull off a lot of the things that have clearly occurred here. And again, there's no problem with throwing, 10 mobsters under the bus if you've got 1,000 more behind them. Sacrificing soldiers is legitimate in any strategy, right?
Right. But I think just the involvement and the entrenchment of some of the players, like say Nixon, Bush Sr., George H.W. Bush, Allen Dulles.
Dulles, yeah, absolutely. Nixon, however, is a weird thing to me because I'm wondering why you even think that Nixon was involved with this. I mean...
Well, he was there that day, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was there as a lawyer for Pepsi Cola and left prior to Kennedy's arrival. Not saying that being a lawyer for a poison company like Pepsi is a good thing, but it falls short of assassination. And and Nixon, not exactly somebody. I've literally seen people try to put a gun in his hand, or be in control of the team, regarding all this. The guy was not a player at that point. Now H.W. Bush is another situation. H.W. Bush, though, people have tried to put him in Dealey Plaza.
Yeah, right.
And I don't believe that for a moment, because here again we have another guy who, what would he be doing there outside of witnessing things or controlling people? He was mainly a business asset and definitely not part of the A team regarding the CIA. Definitely involved with the CIA, despite his public denials and his attempts to obfuscate that fact.
Yeah.
And that's provable in legitimate documents that even the FBI knew that this guy was involved with the CIA. Of course, he had claims that, that he had only become involved when they made him director in the mid-'70s. Of course, he was appointed by Warren Commissioner Gerald Ford, which Gerald Ford is a snitchy, greasy character in American history, despite being, portrayed as a bumbling idiot and a buffoon most of the time. Definitely legitimate of having the criminal label laid on him. So, but of course nobody ever wants to tackle that because he'd seemed to be inept, but so inept that he ascended to the presidency without having been elected as a vice president or a president in a way on his own, right? And of course Nixon, having been involved with the intelligence agencies and being somebody that would have exerted control over them in a legitimate sense, that's the narrative that they try to feed you because he had control over these, Watergate burglars. But at the end of the day, they really set him up. There were people that were black bag job instructors making mistakes that you or I would not make, Stephen, regarding that almost meaningless burglary, making sure they got caught.
Well, yeah, that's what I told you a few days ago in the Skype chat. I think that was a setup from the beginning. They had Nixon, the way I understand it, Nixon's head was getting a little too big, and he thought he was in control, and they had to teach him actually who was in control.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and there you go again, is another guy who has this bizarre idea that he's supposed to be in charge when he's been elected president of the United States, whether legitimate or not. Bottom line is, you challenge the intelligence complex. It was a little too soon to put another bullet into another person's head publicly because there was some backlash coming out. You got to put it into this context, in my opinion. John F. Kennedy challenged the intelligence agencies, got a bullet. Robert Kennedy was going to threaten the intelligence agencies and certainly extract us from Vietnam also as fast as he could. He caught a bullet.
About Ronald Reagan, too.
Well, right. Well, that's a little later, but, I'm just like leading up to Nixon. Yeah. Martin Luther King Jr. takes a bullet basically right after he starts challenging and convincing the people that followed him essentially that the Vietnam War was something that needed to be stopped. Talking about a country that involves itself and spends its resources on warfare and bloodshed is approaching spiritual death. And I know I just poorly paraphrased that, but making statements like that and being a significant figure, among the people, and really having a chance to whip up public sentiment even worse against the war and against those holding the leash regarding the dogs of war. Martin Luther King Jr., well, he had to catch a bullet as well. I make an argument that Malcolm X is also part of this equation for a different reason.
Oh, absolutely.
But the thing is, it was too soon.
Well, the thing about Malcolm X, the story on him was he was all the poster boy for the for the right people, being the anarchist, being the revolutionary for the black people and the Muslims here in America, especially the black Muslims. Mm-hmm. And then he realized, I don't know whether he seen the light or whatever, but he started to say some phrases to the people that were the shadowy people that were kind of handling him. He started talking about, well, why don't we start talking to these white people and start making some compromises. And then all of a sudden he wasn't the poster boy anymore, and they put a bullet in his head.
Well, right, and there's a couple of concerns there, and here you can get into, you know, the legitimate ideas about the assassination capabilities of your FBI people, because, you know, on a domestic level, the CIA ostensibly wasn't supposed to be operating, but they were.
The FBI controls the black people in America.
But yeah, you got it, and
It's always been a fact.
and it's a easily marked fact. You know, when the Black Panthers rose up and basically threatened the order of things, they were systematically destroyed by Hoover's FBI as well. You know, so and I mean, you could look into the murder of Fred Hampton if you like. You can look into the awfully suspicious circumstances by which other Black Panther leaders were killed. By which others were silenced. You get to find out about a lot of interesting double agents in all of these sort of militant black movements, black nationalist movements, if you will. You know, one of them, in fact, is literally pictured kneeling over Martin Luther King's body at the Lorraine Motel. If you take a good look into it, and I do forget the guy's name at this point in time, but I happen to know that it was admitted on the down low, and then they tried to hide it. That this kid who was ostensibly part of what they called the Invaders in Memphis was literally in the pocket of the CIA, and just so happened to be, you know, one of the first people to actually be there to make sure that Martin was dead. You know, despite the stories that Jesse Jackson told later, this kid was legitimately one of the ones who got some of the warm blood of Martin Luther King on his hands.
Oh yes. Well, he look who benefited from King's death. Jackson was one of them.
Well, right, and boy, isn't he an interesting character as well.
He is. He is.
You know, but that's a whole other direction, mind you. And yeah, and Reagan again. To get back to the assassination attempt on Reagan. Now you see Bush really coming into power.
Yeah.
In 1963, he was more or less just a sort of business asset. The agency doesn't necessarily have, you know, slews of super agents that do everything. Right. In some cases, they recruit people that are, you know, depending on your definition of legitimate businessmen and criminal elements. They recruit anybody that they find useful. And, you know, Bush at the time was pretty useful because he was working in and around Cuba.
Yeah, and he was a bonesman from the class of 48.
Oh, right. So he was already quite trusted among, you know, the inner circles, right?
Right.
You know, but the thing is, he's working with, you know, the Zapata oil concerns down near Cuba. And this is true. People point to it and scream, well, the Bay of Pigs was called Operation Zapata, and therefore, you know, Bush was the planner of it because he named it after his oil company. Your one problem is that just coincidentally, what?
Bush wasn't really smart enough to wipe his own rear end without somebody showing him how to do it.
No, and genetically the IQ keeps getting watered down as we go.
As they go along, exactly.
Yeah, sorry, but yeah, I couldn't resist that. I mean, it's, you know,
well,
I dare say Prescott was a smarter guy. And let's not forget about Prescott Bush. We'll get back to him in a sec.
Right.
But he was working with the Zapata Oil Company. There is a geographical reason why the name Zapata comes up. Operation Zapata and the you know, the Bayos Conchinos, it makes sense geographically that it would be named that. You know, it's a happenstance. Could he have been involved in supplies? Could he have been involved in hamstringing those guys on the beach, which thusly was absolutely part of Allen Dulles' plan to try and sucker Kennedy and his people into having to act? Could he have been involved in that? Sure he could have been. But was he a master planner of the Bay of Pigs? Was he a controller of E. Howard Hunt? Oh, no. You know, this is where it gets out of hand. And trying to put a gun in his hand in Dealey Plaza is really hysterical. And I dare say that the photo... No, Bush.
Bush. Okay.
People have tried to say that he literally was a shooter from the Dow Tex building. With a straight face, I've heard people try and say it because there was another guy who was arrested that had like a similar sort of background story regarding being an oil man from Houston and all this other stuff. We do know exactly who that individual was, and his whole thing about being an oil man from Houston was BS because he had a long rap sheet from all over the country for being a thug, a mob hit thug. This is what he did. His name escapes me at the moment, but if you look into it enough, you can find the guy that was arrested coming out of the Dow Tex building. You know exactly who he is. And it's no big shocker that he was there either, because there was all kinds of nefarious things going on in Dallas, Texas at the time, despite what they try and tell you. There was plenty of reason for a whole lot of bad guys to be around at all times. But definitely not one of the shooters. And to think that Herbert Walker Bush could be, a marksman, a great warrior of any sorts, I find it laughable.
The way I understand it, the only thing that Bush Senior could hit was probably a flak bullet from the German ground attacks. 2 of his planes got shot down when he was in World War II. Both of them he named Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the name of his ocean liner down there in the Gulf of Mexico. And wasn't that also called Barbara?
The connection here is that, which is drawn by some people, is that there was the two ships which were given to the Cuban exiles for the Bay of Pigs operation. One of them was named like the Barbara X, and the other was named the Houston.
Oh, okay.
So people have claimed that Bush literally named the ships this. Now, he did name his airplanes that. That's a matter of record. But it seems a little, odd. Anybody could have named something the Barbara. Barbara doesn't have... Oh, it was the Barbara J, excuse me, not the Barbara X.
Okay.
Thank you for the correction in the Skype, sir. Matt, you're right. It was the Barbara J. I don't even know how you heard that yet, but probably you knew where I was going. The Barbara J. And Barbara Bush doesn't have a middle name. There's no reason for her to have a J, so that's kind of weird. The Houston, well, gee, I guess that's an original idea. There's only one Houston in the world, and there's only one guy that would think to name something the Houston. Right. Unless you're in New York and you pronounce it Houston.
Houston, exactly.
But no, I don't find any of that credible because H.W. Bush has been nothing but a middle manager, an opportunist, and somebody who's gained, in the sort of suit way about things. Well, it's not a guy who gets his nails dirty. Yeah. Now, back to the Reagan thing, though. Clearly suspicious when you're having a dinner with the family of the guy who, puts a bullet in the president while you're vice president, a little bit odd.
Well, I think it's the odd thing that while they're campaigning, before he gets the nomination, he tells his people that he's never going to have George Bush in his cabinet anywhere, and then lo and behold, just a few months later, he's on the ticket, and not but 2 months after they get elected, his life is nearly taken. within. I think it's 10 millimeters of being, yeah.
Right, and then of course, following that, he winds up with a couple of bouts of cancer and everything else.
Yeah, he babbles on like a blithering idiot at times, and
Right, and in my estimation, and probably in the heart of hearts of a lot of people who observed Reagan, Bush was very likely really in control, and when he had his one term as the POTUS, as it were, it was really his third term. Let's be honest about it. He probably puppeted Reagan essentially, and
sure. Well, look at Dick Cheney. For most intensive purposes, I think he was in control of those 8 years also.
Oh, well, and here's the fun part about Cheney. Well, before I get into Cheney, notice a parallel here. That Reagan wanted no part of Bush as his vice president, right?
Yeah.
JFK really wanted no part of Lyndon Johnson as his vice president either. Kind of interesting how a bullied-in ticket person always ends up being around when bullets are flying at the president in modern times, huh?
Yes.
But Cheney and Rumsfeld, the pair, the pillars, the bookends of of the stack of satanic Bibles on your shelf. These two gentlemen, where did they begin their political careers regarding being members of White House staff, cabinet, etc.?
Under Reagan.
No.
Bush Sr. Ford. Ah, that's right. I do. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
And they keep reoccurring.
Yeah, but they really rose to prominence during Reagan's term, though. I think, though.
Oh yeah, but even so, these are guys who are constantly in and out of the White House. For such diverse groups.
Yeah.
I mean, take a look at the diversity of the administrations that they were involved in, right? And meanwhile, switching chairs essentially. This time I'll be chief of staff. You can be the Secretary of Defense. This is the way this goes. Well, you know what? Next time I'll be the vice president. Let's just keep playing the game. And meanwhile, the puppet is really all the same, just dressed a little differently. And it's my contention that ever since Reagan was selected, I'm being nice, ever since Reagan was selected to be the puppet in chief, realistically, the Bush family has had control. They had control over his administration. Let's just say you and I are correct that that's about how that game was played. He had his own single term. Despite the public appearances, tell me he didn't have something well vested in the Clinton years.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, there's just a lot of ties going on there with that Clinton thing. And, you really want to think about it, too. George Bush has been in control from 63 up until right now. He's still in control of Obama as far as I'm concerned.
Well, see, 63, I don't know if I'd give him that. I mean, he wasn't really a favored individual. I mean, he was losing Senate elections and House selections.
I didn't say he was likable. I said I think he's had some type of control.
Oh, yeah, but the thing is, if the powers that be, because I still contend he's a middle manager regarding this whole game.
Sure, a lieutenant? Is that what you're trying to say, or something like that? Or?
At best, yeah, because he's not, again, part of the intellectual A-team. And as we have already noted, the quality is getting more and more watered down as time goes.
Well, you don't have to be smart to be a bad guy, do you?
Absolutely not. All you got to be is dedicated to being a bad guy.
Bad guy.
And I know I joke and tongue firmly in cheek, but these are serious issues, of course. But the thing is, look, what we just covered about his control time, if you go up to Clinton, you're talking about 20 years there.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, of course, who takes over next? But his son.
Junior.
Well, not quite a junior because he's not a Herbert Walker Bush.
Yeah.
But he is a W.
Yeah. Do you know the joke about Junior?
Oh, go ahead and tell me. I love these.
Well, do you know what let me think of it here. Do you know what a tortoise on top of a fence post is?
Nope.
A turtle on top of a fence post. Well, a turtle on top of a fence post. He didn't get there by himself, so he had to have help getting there. That's a joke about W.
Well, you know what? That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So a guy that was, coked up and drinking a lot and decides to come and be a born-again Christian, because usually that's what people do when they have screwed up good enough on this planet that nobody else will listen to them.
And they're also trying to get elected.
Well, yeah, that too. But But again, usually though, I mean, legitimately, if you're not in politics, it's usually the guy who has screwed up so bad that nobody else will take their phone calls except maybe Jesus, and he doesn't have to speak or anything, so you're good. You know, and I'm sorry, that's a bad joke, but I like making it because honestly, that's what I see a lot of times. You know, there's a whole lot of born again Christians that used to come out of prison. You know, so on and so on. But anyway, this guy who's in that condition, who, you know, couldn't do anything on his own, had failed companies, you know, mastered the art of drilling dry holes in Texas, you know, where a dog and a javelin is all you could probably need to find oil at the time. You know, this guy ends up being president of the United States. To me, it's the continuation again of the real Bush doctrine. Now, to try and extend it backwards into 1963, though, I don't see how he didn't have control over Nixon. You know, although Prescott Bush has something to do with Nixon's, you know, rise.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
You know, but it doesn't really put HW in a great position yet, and Ford was comparable anyway. Regardless of how he played off that he was an idiot, he really wasn't. And he sold everybody on the, you know, the good old man kind of thing. I mean, that goes on too, but, you know, he's an idiot, he's a joke, he's a reoccurring sketch on Saturday Night Live. You know, it's not believable. He was really well in bed with the intelligence agencies, a proven FBI snitch, and exactly the guy who decided to change the language in the Warren Commission, by the way, regarding the back or the back of the neck, so that we could move that single bullet up so it makes a lot more sense.
Ah, yes, okay.
Literally his hand edit.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. People didn't find that out until they found the documents in the Gerald Ford Presidential Library.
For them, huh?
Yeah, no, why bother to? You know, Alan Dulles famously said when they were talking about printing, see, here's a good example of how they learned things over the years. When they were talking about printing the 26 volumes in an executive session of the Warren Commission, which I tell you that statistically Alan Dulles was the most active member of the Warren Commission. It was really more like the Dulles Commission.
Right.
But and just for those who don't understand this was the head of the CIA that Kennedy fired post Bay of Pigs, is now presiding over the investigation into his death. And gee, you think he might have a little bias? But anyway, he said that, you know, go ahead and print the evidence, go ahead and print whatever you want. The American people don't read anyway. Maybe a professor will write, you know, a paper on it, a thesis or two, but nobody will read that thesis either because Americans don't read.
Well, they're just scared of them anyway. I mean, people are just scared of them anyways.
Mm-hmm. But that was about the Warren Commission volume. So, of course, when the 9/11 Commission comes around, they were smart enough to not bother to give us the incongruous, ridiculous evidence this time.
Right.
So, you know, at least they learned something.
They just left it out.
Yeah.
Like Building 7.
Oh, yeah, Building 7, whatever's in those 28 pages.
Yeah.
The, you know, the virtual need to find out where the money actually came from is irrelevant. Blah, blah, blah.
Did you ever hear the Donald Rumsfeld interview on man called Mueller out of Chicago there?
I never heard that one, no.
Oh, this is great. You can look this up on YouTube. Just search up Donald Rumsfeld, man called Mueller. Mueller asked him about Building 7 on September 11th, 2001, you know, and Rumsfeld in his most condescending voice that you could ever try to imagine, he says, I have never heard of Building 7 ever in my life. I don't know what you're talking about. And you can just hear the condescending voice, his condescending attitude, just an outright lie.
Yeah. Well, in fairness,
heard that before in my life.
Yeah. In fairness to Donald Rumsfeld, did I just say that? Yeah. Oh, okay. Wow. I think I'm tired, Stephen. Steve, I don't know. No, but seriously, in fairness to Donald Rumsfeld, he's condescending and nasty like that about everything. If you want to look at a guy who has absolutely no remorse whatsoever, and I made this point a while ago, no soul, no remorse, and really appears to be something other than a human being.
That begs the question, Chuck. There's this conspiracy out there about a lot of these people are clones, and how does somebody possibly, how do they come to that conclusion, or how does somebody not come to that conclusion? Because just hundreds and hundreds of these people that are in control just don't seem to have souls.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Are they clones? I'm not one really for that conspiracy, but it makes you think.
Well, the more time goes on and you observe this behavior, you have to give them a little bit of leeway regarding that kind of stuff, don't you? Because it seems, incomprehensible to those of us that have, those crazy human traits like empathy or consideration for the planet or anything else, that people would behave in this manner and be human beings, anything resembling ourselves. But if you want to observe Rumsfeld really showing absolutely no remorse for the amount of damage that he's done in recent years to the planet, to other people, and everything else, I mean, if you examine his involvement with aspartame, and then on top of that, if you examine his involvement with stuff like, hold on a second, we are getting a call, by the way, and I'm going to complete that thought in a second.
Okay.
Caller, you're on, but I'm going to just finish my thought, and then I'll love to hear what you have to say or ask. The thing is that if you look at Errol Morris's recent film featuring Donald Rumsfeld, and if you know Errol Morris, he's the guy who brought you The Fog of War, and kind of showed you at least a somewhat remorseful Robert McNamara regarding Vietnam. And McNamara had a serious understanding of the damage he did before he died. But Rumsfeld is a completely unapologetic creature regarding that, and regarding his the scourge of aspartame, which he was fully involved with, neck deep in, as far as unleashing that on the public. So it does lead me to start to want to believe in some of these other theories. Oh, the caller dropped. Well, look, 714, if you want to call back in, please do. I don't know what happened there, but, call back in. This is the thing. It is a strange evolution that we have witnessed regarding the soulless nature of those that seem to clutch onto power regardless of who is selected, regardless of whether they're following the elephants or they're following the jackasses. It all seems rather purple as opposed to red and blue to me.
I think they're following the family. A lot of these people are all related to each other, and they've been told for centuries that they are the ones that are supposed to have control, or to be given control. And they pledge to their own families, to their own sororities, to like Skull and Bones and some of these other secret groups, and they pledge to these groups. And I wonder if they're actually just so brainwashed that they can't really feel for the American people.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the thing is that I never used to want to believe that either, that everybody was interrelated and we actually have an American royalty. But the more evidence that seems to come forward, I have to begin to accept this idea for certain, And we've gotten away from the JFK thing a little bit. Let's say this, though, because I've heard other people also contend that Kennedy was no more than an elitist, and he was just scum anyway, because after all, we've witnessed the character assassination post-mortem on this guy, what some of us call the second assassination of John F. Kennedy. I'm not a great worshiper of the guy or anything, but fair is fair. He was not part of the inside elite. that people want to place him in. His family was rich, but they were, nouveau riche in a way.
I think Joe Kennedy, Joe Sr., I think he wanted his son to try to rise to that type of a prominence, and I think he might have had to have made some kind of concessions when he was a young man, make backdoor deals 20, 30, 40 years earlier.
Right, and that probably did happen, but the idea that that this guy was a mobster and a bootlegger is actually based on some really thin evidence. The truth is actually much harsher than if he was just a bootlegger. I wouldn't really look down my nose on him.
I think he was probably a top lieutenant in some mafia.
Well, no, not really. The reality about where Joe Kennedy got his true wealth from, and where he really got his power from is, first of all, the family interactions there. Even marrying Rose Kennedy was a calculation, because Rose had come from the Fitzgeralds, which had held power in the Northeast. Honey Fitz, the grandfather, and some others. Joe Kennedy was the product of immigrants, but what he did ascend to financially and regarding the power structure in this country, his real path to power, so to speak, came from Wall Street manipulation before Wall Street manipulation was Wall Street manipulation. Quite literally, he was brought into the Roosevelt, administration in order to set the rules so that the thieves could not rob us blind as they do today.
Well, you say Wall Street, but I say top elite mafia. That's what Wall Street is to me.
Oh, okay. So we're describing the same thing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
See, I have a little more respect for the term mafia, and it might be because I have a vowel at the end of my name.
I do too. I actually have a lot more respect for drug dealers and mafia because they won't go after certain things and they won't go after certain people.
Yeah, even if their morals are askew, they still have a few.
Yeah.
And I've often made this joke as well. Not only the thing about the suit with the mob, but let me tell you something. You're forced to pay your protection money, to the banker criminals and to the politician criminals, but they don't actually guarantee that your businesses won't burn down, do they? At least with the Italian, you might have a chance of surviving the situation if you play the game.
Right.
At the end of the day, though, these people, these money people, the bankers, the true elites, the people that actually control, not the political system, but the real blood of the system, which resides with the money, which resides with the international banking cartels, those people have absolutely no moral compunction about burning whoever it is at the end of the day, regardless of whether it's profitable or not. There is absolutely no loyalty to anyone, minion or oppressed individual or anyone under their thumb in any way, shape, or form. At the end of the day, they'll burn their mother for $1. And this is probably part of the world that Joe Kennedy rose to because he was rather smart about his manipulations, and again was one of the guys who was brought in to show the regulators how to catch the thieves because he was one of the best thieves there was. So to me, a whole lot more nefarious than your local thug who would tell you, it would be a shame if something happened to your donut shop, Pally. But again, these are my opinions. And we gotten away from the JFK assassination, of course.
We've been chasing all kinds of rabbits, haven't we?
And, believe it or not, we're actually down to about the last 10 minutes here, Steve.
Yeah.
And don't know what happened to the phone calls. I got a couple of them, but they seem to have dropped. I don't know if there's a problem with me taking calls, but either way, I think we've had an interesting conversation here.
Yeah,
And
you got some things about me or anything, or?
well, we can always do that tomorrow night, or we could try this again.
Yeah.
Get into another subject if you like, or listen, man, I could probably talk about stuff with the JFK assassination, for the next 5 years every week with you if you wanted to, and we wouldn't cover all of what I've done. Of course, finally, although I've said for many years that I probably would never release a book, there is a possibility that I will be authoring a book, based on the stuff that I've researched and taken a look at over the years, and explain some of the things that I've never really released anywhere. Some of my private tapes I'm going to have to go back over and really make sure of what it is I remember about the people I've talked to, and some of the investigations that I've undertaken over the years. But this is what it's all about. There may actually be a book coming out of me by 2016, and we'll see how that goes. I don't know how well it'll be received because I'm a little tougher on some of this stuff than other people are, and
I think you need to be writing your own book, not have somebody else write it about you. You probably won't get much control.
Oh no, that's the point. This will be me writing it.
Oh, okay.
Which I never did that before. You see, I've always contributed to other people's stuff.
Right.
And I've given over wholesale pieces of research, interviews, documents that I put together to, form an idea of what went on, regarding the agencies, regarding money trails, regarding, disproving a lot of the given mob theories out there. Actually, I contributed to a bunch of that stuff.
Yeah.
Despite whatever the author decided to do with it, and basically signed away, any sort of contention later on about, stating or claiming authorship to certain things. I've given them up before.
Yeah.
Because I was more interested in getting the truth out there than making a buck or getting the credit.
Sure.
But finally, I think it might be time to put out some of the things that I have that I've learned over the years, and some of the revelations that I have that I've not seen anywhere else in the literature. And the best I could count up, I mean, I've read more than 300 books devoted to the assassination. Well over 100,000 pages of documents, gone over films, photographs. I don't know how many interviews I've actually conducted, but we're talking a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
And so I do have a base of knowledge on this, and I don't claim to have the ultimate solution. So there's a spoiler for you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody but the people that were in control back then actually knows the entire story.
Right, and the exact solution will continue to be obscured, partially because, and it's not because of the passage of time that we've lost the ability to gain the truth. I think that if you were going to have shooters in this case, you would have had a trusted asset, liquidate them right away, so that there was no chance of any of the legitimate story ever getting out. And we never even got into the Chicago plot, the pre-existing stuff. We can do that tomorrow night if you like, or even make another trip at this on my show if you want. It's all up to you, sir.
Certainly. I got a question for you, though.
Sure. Setting
aside just the nonsensical brainwashing of the American people, the left-right paradigm, the red Kool-Aid, blue Kool-Aid drinkers, and also the people that are just have nothing but the cognitive dissonance in their nature. They just won't look outside their paradigm, won't look outside the box, so to speak. What do you think? Why do you think the alternative media isn't 100 times or 1,000 times bigger than what it is right now?
Well, because we're still looking at a majority of the population that
they're brainwashed by the American media and the government.
Well, yeah, because they're now one and the same. Maybe they always were, but it's been streamlined. You know.
Well, it's been fashioned. It's been a social engineering experiment that's gone their way.
Right, they've succeeded for the most part in controlling the history as it emerges. No reason to rewrite the history books if you've controlled the story while it's unfolding in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
Because after all they're doing is editing their pre-existing, script that they have already produced.
Yeah, they a lot of people say we're just in a movie. We're just watching a movie here, and we're just actors in it. We're all going along with the picture show.
Well, the Matrix is real. Is real. The Matrix is real.
Yeah.
And Skynet has gone operational.
Okay.
And this is the reality of the world we live in.
What do you think about that scientific discovery of the? I think the number is somewhere around 99.7% of an atom is free in open space, and they don't really know what holds it together. It's just a vibration that holds it together.
Well, my explorations of what I have termed the energetic world can explain these things, but you have to step outside of the paradigm once again. Magnetism plays a greater role in this world than people give it credit for. The literal interaction of energy itself is not being counted in the equation in a lot of cases.
No, it isn't. And spiritualism isn't either.
Right, and of course, it is best to lead us away from the universal truths that are contained within our spiritual understandings, and to try and subdivide us, because the divide and conquer strategy has always been effective. If you can keep the poor people fighting with each other, they will certainly not have the time, energy, or resource to organize and turn against the people who are really controlling things, who are really oppressing them, and who are really their enemies. So it has been an effective strategy since there were men who sought to control other men. So therefore, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They're still using it.
Yes, that's right.
And anything they can do to keep us away from our natural selves or our understanding of the world around us is definitely a profitable equation.
That's off of a playbook that's thousands of years old, too.
You got it. And in the last couple of minutes, I want to remind everybody that you need to seek out Stephen Roberts out there on the internet. Find Cancel the Cabal. Definitely interesting stuff. I see your videos on YouTube. You're also on a couple of different networks. If you want to mention them real quick before my bumper kicks in and knocks us out, go right ahead.
Sure. On Sundays, I'm on Revolution Radio. From 3 to 5 p.m. On Wednesdays, I'm on People's Internet Radio from 7 to 9. And Fridays, I'm here. I'm on the Liberty Beacon from 7 till 8, maybe 7 till 9. If that could be changing, but I'm not positive. And Saturdays, I'm on PSN Radio from midnight to 2 a.m. And I'm also on, I simulcast on Paranoia TV, Tesla Wolf Media out of Oregon up there. And I do at least 2 or 3 of them shows I simulcast with. So.
The same people that do Clyde Lewis.
That's right. Same people. Yep.
I love Ground Zero Radio. I've actually been trying to get Clyde to come on the show with me and talk a little bit. I've 5
nights a week,
Oh, I know that, but he's made appearances with Jack Blood and he's made appearances elsewhere. I would love to get a hold of him for even a half hour to just talk. I mean, and he's actually allowed me on his show as a caller to talk for about 35 minutes before, but
there was like 3 station breaks in there though, right?
No, actually, I rolled straight through and was the whole segment. But I was just a recurring caller, when he was talking about the guillotines and all that kind of stuff, capital punishment and things like this. I don't get too much into his alien discussions, but I do appreciate his deep political ideas and where he's at regarding some of that stuff is definitely amazing. I want to thank everybody for tuning in on both networks. The Ochelli Effect is done. Everybody have a good night, and I will see you very, very soon, Kim. Bye.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
See, but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? Pistols and frontal slap of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously,